Hi, it's Toy Soldiers again, and this time we're going to be talking about control. I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit about what control actually looks like in UFS, because when I talk to a lot of people about what control is, and you ask them, like, hey, what do you think control is in this game, they start bringing up cards like revoke, they start saying things like, oh, it's like denying your opponent their effects and all this other junk, but I'm going to be here to set the record straight. Okay, and the first thing we need to do is we need to define what control actually is. Okay, and control in UFS can really be boiled down to one thing, and that's just making the decisions. Okay, whatever that would be, it's just making the decisions for the cards. Okay, because really that's how you determine if you're in control of something in real life, right? Like if I'm in control of this pen, for example, I get to make the decisions around this pen. I get to choose if the cap's on, I get to choose if the cap's off, I get to choose all those things. I don't get to choose what my neighbor does with his stationery because he's in control of it, right? Like that's literally what control is. So we're going to kind of just take that basic idea and we're going to apply that to UFS, because we're not going to, narrow our focus too much. We're really going to try to get a strong grasp of this. And I'm going to try to explain this in as simple of terms as possible to make this work, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw ourselves a fun little picture here. Look, here's person number one, and over here can be person number two, and they're at a table, and let's use a different color. I've got all these colors here. And person number one's got his playmat, and person number two's got his playmat. Yeah, look, it's a nice pretty picture. All right, so we can break control down into two primary categories. And then from there, we can break it down again into two more subcategories. Yay! And then we can even break that further down into two more subcategories. Sure, why not? Okay, the two primary categories of control we can break down into control of, we'll say this is my side, control of my side of the board. That's category one. Category two, control of the opponent's side of the board. Now, what lots of people end up doing is they end up thinking that control is the ability to do number two. Not entirely true. A really genuine control deck in UFS is just a deck that has the ability to make the majority of decisions in both areas. Okay, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. All right, so those are the two primary sections of control. Now, if we go to the two subcategories of control, let's grab another color. I got a whole box full of markers here. All right, there is the opponent's staging area. Let's say their deck's like here or something. And then here is the card pool. Yay! The two subcategories of control is the ability to control the staging area and the ability to control the card pool. Yeah, you following along here? And even those two categories can then be broken down to each side as well. All right, look at my nice little pictures. Isn't this fun? We're learning with pictures. Okay, so these are the two subcategories. And then if you want to get into like the subcategories, that's when you start getting into stuff like, card pool. Is it an attack in the card pool, an action in the card pool, or a foundation in the card pool? The ability to make decisions there and of those cards, or same thing back here. The ability to control assets, assets, foundations, and or their character card. That's the sub category. But anyways, now that you've kind of gotten a general idea of what control actually is, let's expand on that. Let's kind of increase our thoughts. So what do you mean by controlling the different sides of the board? Okay, so let's say, for example, that my opponent has three foundations out. I don't even care what they are. It could be like 8,000 degrees and a dust in the wind, something stupid like that. All right, great. Then we're going to say in my hand, I've got two of this dirty card that you guys are all too familiar with. Well, hunts for spiders and dragons. Anyways, let's say I've got two of these bad boys and a splatter something, okay? if I'm holding onto these cards in my hand and my opponent has those two foundations, okay, who actually controls those two foundations? You know, according to the basic laws of logic and all that kind of stuff, my opponent controls these. It's theirs, they're their cards, and they get to make the decisions. But actually, who's going to end up making the decisions for those cards? Well, if I'm holding onto pieces like these, very common control pieces for this current meta, I get to make the decisions in regards to cards on my opponent's side of their staging area. That's very important to think about, right? It's not just hunts for spiders and dragons either. You can have stuff that's like commit 1 foundation in your opponent's staging area. That helps you control things in your opponent's side of the field. Kuga, which is commit 1 card in your opponent's staging area, would there be action or assets. I keep saying actions. Assets, character cards, and foundations. The action card Stop, if you don't know what that is, that one after a block lets you commit your opponent's character. This card also lets you gain control of your opponent's staging area. And it does that just because you're making decisions for your opponent's cards. And any time that you can make decisions instead of your opponent making decisions, that's going to help you win games. Pretty much because all any game really is just exchanging you know, I'm just making the decision saying that, hey, my deck should win, and this is the reason why, and I make a decision, like I'm going to attack or play whatever, and then your opponent's making decisions, and you... Where am I going with this that I can make sense with it? You got to think of it this way, okay? If each person during the course of a game is going to end up making 50 decisions each, and their decks are perfectly matched, those 50 decisions should end up in a draw, right? If each decision is of the same value. Whereas if you can take away some of those decisions where you actually get to make 60 and they only get to make 40 decisions during the game, well, who do you think is going to end up winning? Who's going to be able to change the game state into their advantage? Probably you. Okay. I know this is really fragmented, so you guys are doing a good job trying to follow along my chaos. Again, I gotta stop making videos so late. So we've kind of gone over what control in the staging area is during your opponent's side. So now let's go down one more step. Okay, now we're going into the control of the card pool of your opponent's side. Now there's lots of cards nowadays that can affect your opponent's card pool, and Mathematician would be a very common one these days, which destroy after your opponent's attack resolves, turn it face down, playable while committed. This is a card that lets you make decisions in regards to your opponent's card pool. But it doesn't just end there. It can be as simple as cards like 8,000 Degrees or Dust in the Wind, because you're getting to make decisions in regards to the attacks that they're playing within their card pool. There's lots of decks that are designed around walling or blocks. There used to be a card in just a few sets ago called Vespera, and her whole thing was about reducing the speeds of attacks, and she could literally just completely take control of your opponent's attack and use it to her advantage, and then she would reversal and get a bunch of effects and blah 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 blah. It sucked to play against. My point being is that she owned the opponent's attacks. She got to make all the decisions in regards to them, because by the second that your opponent played something, she was playing, or your opponent was playing right into your trap. Nightman nowadays does similar things where he wants your opponent to attack into him, and he wants to lock you down with that. So he wants to gain control of your opponent's card pool. And that's something to think about as well when you're trying to establish control in UFS. But it doesn't just end in us being able to control our opponent's section of the field. That's not the pure definition of control. And here's where certain cards become extremely, extremely valuable in UFS. If you're going to pull anything out of this video and you're going to try to make any sense out of what I'm rambling on about, let it be this. The ability to maintain adequate control of your side of the field, as well as gaining some control of your opponent's side of the field, is what's really going to set you apart from other players. And there's very specific cards that have the ability to do both sides at the same time. And those cards are insanely, insanely powerful. If you're ever sitting there wondering why Revoke is such a ridiculously strong card, it's not because it can just negate and enhance. No, this card is ridiculously strong because it can control both card pools in both sides of the game. That's massive. It's not just like after you're an enhance played on your opponent's attack. No, it's after your opponent plays an enhance, any enhance anywhere that he's trying to do. If he's trying to control your side, or if he's trying to make his side stronger, you can then take that decision away from him. That's what Revoke does. That's what makes it so ridiculously strong. That's why a card like Damnation is so amazing, because again, after your opponent plays an enhance, it's letting you make decisions for your opponent, and it's reusable. You can do it as many times as you want. This thing isn't restricted on one side of the field or another. That's huge. We can even get into cards like 8,000 Degrees. Another reason why this card is just so absolutely phenomenal. Another reason why, what's the other one that's come out right now that's really strong? Forbidden Knowledge is another one that's insanely strong, because they say this attack gets +1 or -1 damage. Again, ability to make decisions in both your side of the field and your opponent's side of the field in the card pool. That's amazing. That's huge. It's not a card like Portal Barrier, which I keep telling people doesn't even hold a freaking candle to these, that only affects what? It only reduces the damage of your opponent's card pool, and only on a niche moment. These cards have the ability to stretch their influence so much further into the game, and they give you so many more decisions that you can make in the game. That's huge, okay? Understand that. Please understand that. If you're going to play cards that have massive influence. Guardian's Marks, another one. After one of your other foundations would be destroyed, flipped, or removed due to your opponent's effect, commit it instead. This card does an amazing job of maintaining control of this little blue section down here. It protects it. That's why this card's great. Maybe you're only running it at 1, but you only really need to run it at 1 because it helps you hold control of your side of the board. Really, really, really good. Okay? So please people, please understand that, okay? Control in UFS is so much more than just playing Revokes, playing Damnation, playing Evil, and thinking that you can just, lock your opponent down from doing things. It's not about locking your opponent down from doing things. If you're giving your opponent free reign of your side of the field the whole time the match is going. Now, there was other stuff that I didn't quite cover. You may be thinking, if you're a little bit of a smarter person, being like, but Kevin, there's another zone. Yes, there's another zone of control, and you may have noticed that it's right here and right here, and that is the player's hand of cards, right? That's my really bad drawing of cards in somebody's hand. You're gonna have to forgive me here. I'm an artist. Did you know that? Yeah, you wouldn't tell by this, but there is another field of control, which is the opponent's hand, and that's basically just your discard mechanics and your discard mechanics and draw mechanics and anti-draw mechanics, I guess. But that's pretty much all you can really do to interact with the hand zone at this moment in the game. But I don't want to get too much into hand control, because there's a very big item in regards to Yomi levels and decision making, and this is when you start getting into hand control, you start getting a little bit into how the mind games and the poker-esque aspect of UFS, where you're trying to bait your opponent to doing things, or you're trying to guess what they're going to do, and trick your opponent to playing cards. That's why hand control, I'm going to cover that later on in its own thing. But for the sake of learning in basics of control in UFS, this crap right here, please take it hard. Remember this stuff, okay? If you're sacrificing control of your own side of the field, you're being dumb, okay? Maintain control of both your opponent's side and your side. Try to find cards that allow you to maintain control of both sides, or allow you to influence more than just one little zone. Because you can even get into like, oh, well, this is technically a zone as well, right? If you're playing a mill deck. Mill kind of sucks in this game, so it happens sometimes, but it's pretty rare. Technically, the discard pile is another zone that you can make decisions for, right? Right? You're starting to follow along here? The more areas of influence that you can lord over, the better. The more decisions that you can make within the game state, better, right? You want to make sure that your opponent is making as few decisions as possible, and that you are getting to make the majority of the decisions in the game. If you can do that in your deck, it doesn't matter if your deck's cobbled together with commons and uncommons, you're going to be able to come out on top, because you're going to be able to wrest control of the match away from your opponent. And that's what really control is whoever is getting to make decisions in the game, that's who's actually in control. So take this to heart the next time you're building a control deck. I know this was probably super fragmented and didn't make tons of sense to everyone, but I'm hoping this helped somebody, and this made the game a little bit more clear to somebody, and helped, maybe you'll net a couple more wins out of your next weekly because of it. And that's really all I can ask for. So till next time, this is Toy.